All right, let's go and welcome to the How to Retire from NASCAR DFS live preview show. I am your host, everyone's favorite former DFS tout, the retired Jason Hamlet. Starting to actually feel retired now, as I have done zero research ahead of today's slate. If you find yourself coming to the channel in a similar position and maybe you consider yourself to have a lucky four-leaf clover in your pocket with St. Patty's Day today, as to breaking down all the action in Thunder Valley today is a man who has been up working feverishly through the night, doing all the work for us from Daily Fan Racing, my friend, and your personal NASCAR DFS ATM today, Ryan Larkin.
I was working late. That is true. I was up till 2 o'clock.
You look it.
That's always fun. Thank you. It's, I'm exhausted, honestly. I don't like doing it, but it's a necessity sometimes. Excited to talk about Bristol, though. It's a super fun race. Like, there are so many ways to build for this race that makes it super exciting. It's also going to spread out ownership and make things difficult. So personally, really ready to get into it, build a few lines already, and hoping something hits.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy slate. Like you said, a lot of different ways to go, but you're going to help us pick the right choices to navigate, right? To get us to some green. I do know, like, the one positive today, we're already all winners, right? Especially you, right? You hated the dirt, so there's got to be no one else more happy to see Bristol with no dirt than you.
Yeah. Bristol dirt was a waste for NASCAR. Like, it's fine from an entertainment standpoint, but at some point we have to stop just making everything about entertainment, right? Last week, yes, there has to be some fundamental actual sport aspect to racing where it no longer becomes a sport. It just becomes nonsense. Like, people were complaining about last week, and it was a good race. Like, Phoenix was
imagine if somebody went to Vince McMahon at some point and said, Vince, you got to have real wrestling. Like, you can't just create a sport all about entertainment. And look at the WWE.
Yeah, and their most famous wrestlers are Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, and all the real wrestlers. Yes, you want the entertainment. Yes, you need that, but you also need to see the best drivers succeed because they're the best drivers. And Bristol Dirt just threw a wrench in that. Now, Kyle Larson and those guys maybe are the best drivers, and the argument could be made that they succeeded either way, but it still was an anomaly from a 36 race schedule. Like, we shouldn't have weird anomalies like that at all. Like, you should stay within the bounds of what you do, and that wasn't it. And that was my biggest gripe with it.
You're good with this.
The cars weren't built for dirt, right? So that was my biggest gripe. But I'm glad it's gone. We get a traditional race here. Like, looking into this slate from a DFS standpoint is so inspiring to me. Like, I'm so excited. I'm in love with the way we can build lineups today. There's so many options, so many potential Dominator builds, so many things that we can do. And I'm just reminded, like, this is how we should be building Bristol, not playing for what we were with the dirt last time around. So, yeah, I'm really excited about that aspect. I'm glad the dirt's gone. I'm glad we don't have to worry about some oddity and we can focus on real racing.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. I know I mentioned to start the show, that I'm actually starting to feel retired now, right? I know you called me out the last show that I put out, some core 4 or whatever the week before. I've done zero content out last 2 weeks, nothing on my Twitter feed, minimal research ahead of the show today. I've actually started a garden, playing a ton of disc golf, shooting my bow in preparation of the turkey season. I'm just, living the life of a retiree. But, in doing that, my DFS results have struggled, right? I've been suffering a little bit. It's been an abysmal start to the season, right? And I know there are probably many people out there, who probably start in the same way, similar to me. Like, maybe who had a rough stretch out there, right? As NASCAR can be, right? So I just want to pick your brain first to start. If you can have any advice, for people like myself who are finding their shelf, 4 weeks in the season, rough go of things, like, what are some common What are some common mistakes that you see some people making?
The biggest thing is overexposure to drivers, I think, most of the time. And if you're making 1 or 2 or so lines, it's kind of hard to get away from someone that's going to be super popular. But, we were talking before I got on this about how much Priest and Hocevar I was getting. And it's just like, I know going into this race, if I have an abundance of Hocevar and Rex, my lineups are shot, right? So I see that a lot. It's kind of thing we battle the most is just honing in on one driver and not realizing that there's maybe 6 or 7 options that could all hit, especially in this generation of Cup where pretty much everyone has a good car. Everyone has the capability of scoring a good result. And the littlest thing can kind of sway a slate the other way. So that's probably the biggest thing. But on the flip side, we're only 4 races in. 2 of them are super speedways, right? We had our first short track race with the new package, and honestly, I thought it went well. And the Toyotas were the guys to beat, which was kind of known going into it. So I didn't feel like we got anything too random there. And then Vegas was still just kind of Vegas. So I feel like we're early into the season. If you're losing right now, or you have been losing, long way to go. A lot more normal races to go. And eventually, like a race like today, there's going to be a driver that hits most likely at sub 15% ownership that if you're on, that's going to make up for all the losses you've had. So I think just play it out, be careful, and don't play too much bankroll, and then just make sure you get your ownerships right.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one like mistake I consistently make. I think is just like figuring out that exposure, right? Like because I don't play a ton of lineups, right? I'm maybe playing 6 or 7 lineups at most a week, right? So I feel like I'm always overweight on somebody that ends up just destroying my day before it even gets started, right? Like I'm always, battling for min cash to start every slate. But that's the way it goes sometimes, right?
Yeah, or you have the optimal for 150 laps and then Nick Sanchez wipes you out, which happened last time.
Like one thing I also find myself doing is like I find myself talking myself out of guys, right? Because they're going to be a popular play, right? And it's a mistake I make. Like last week,
I don't care about that with NASCAR. Yeah, I lean into the chop.
See, like last week, for example, like I was under on Christopher Bell. Like it was a stupid choice, right? But I played 5 lineups. I had him in 1, but like I talked myself into like, okay, like everybody's gonna be on him. Like there is a situation where Christopher Bell could just like maybe not move, maybe it's hard to pass, like and just rides around 11th, 12th most race and doesn't get those Dom points that everybody's counting on that he's gonna get, right? And underperforms. So I went under on him with that thought, which it looked good in the first stage. Like that might have been a possibility, but then like obviously he got there and now my day shot, right? Like he number 1 scored, right? So like, yeah, not doing shit like that, right?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, Bell felt so obvious last week. But you're right. Like if you go into a race and honestly, Kyle Larson's that driver for me today. Like where I know what the upside is. I know what the potential is. But if he doesn't reach the lead and he doesn't dominate, can I leverage that into being underweight on the field? And last week I felt a lot more confident in Bell than I did pretty much anyone all year. Like I felt super strong about that play. But, Larson has a lot of stiff competition, and it starts at the top with Blaney being extremely strong, Hamlin, Bell's, and, right there as well. So I can see a scenario where Larson only leads 30 laps like he did the last 2 races here, right? He hasn't led a bunch of laps with the next-gen car at Bristol, so maybe that happens again, and he isn't this uber great play that we should be on. But on the flip side, I can also see him leading 200 laps. And, we're having this discussion in the premium chat about the resin earlier that they lay down in the lower groove. And the difference between PJ1 and resin to me has always been that the resin gives up quicker, is that groove is going to get wider here and that they're going to be able to run the top earlier into the race. And that's going to have a bigger effect. I think that benefits Kyle Larson more than anybody. Right. So on the other hand, I'm thinking, man, I can easily see him just dominating the second half of this race. And so I'm weighing that, trying to decide which way to go. I've ended up kind of in middle of the road, probably with the rest of the slate in that 35% range, 35% range with my ownership, and just going to ride that way. But it's a tough one because if you're willing to take that stand and he doesn't lead, you get a huge edge on the field, not only who are going to miss on Larson, but spend a lot of salary on Kyle Larson trying to get that play to work and whatnot. So it's an interesting dilemma that you have to face with chalk drivers like Larson, like Bell, like Hamlin in this race, like Blaney. So there's a lot of guys to consider for that, but I also think that spreads things out. It gives you multiple options, and that's what makes lineup building fun today is because you can mix and match and do all different types of things. There's plenty of cheap options. There's plenty of mid-range options. A lot of guys have good success history here that you can kind of lean into as well, and I really like that. Like I shied away from the 8K range a lot. I shied away from Ross Chastain a lot. even though like he's an obvious play from a place differential perspective, I can pay down and just get more dominators. I can get those top end guys, and in a 500 lap race where dominator points are king, I'm kind of more interested in that. I'm more interested in those guys that are going to lead laps than I am getting Ross Chastain finishing 8th and scoring 60 points.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, everything you say there is perfect. So you've already kind of started breaking down the slate. So let's dive into things, right? Disclaimer here, guys. I'm new to the whole hosting thing. Still only episode number 3 here for us. So please ask questions if you got them. If I'm missing or if I don't ask about a driver that you want to know about, please ask it here. You guys have been doing a great job on that the first couple shows. There will be a recap at the end where Larkin will be given his core 4, pour 4, and the 4 more just to kind of recap his strategy for today. So if you are stumbling across this page and we've got about a half hour to a lock, you can go and fast forward and you can find kind of the breakdown there. Thank you so much, of course, for tuning in, finding the channel. Please do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I think we just crossed over 420 subscribers, so please subscribe if you haven't. Let's push to that 500 number. It would be sweet. Okay, so yeah, let's get into strategy. You already touched on the strategy, right? 500 laps slate, right? And how does that different today than a normal week, right? Obviously dominator points are going to be key, right? So let's just go into talking about dominators, right? You kind of already touched on that. Who are the favorite guys? Obviously, Blaney, right? Really, really fast in practice across the board. He's the favorite to win. What are your thoughts on Blaney this week?
Yeah, I love Ryan Blaney. That's an obvious play for me personally. He's we saw it last week. With certain guys where like the practice speed did turn over into the race performance. And I think that's more likely to happen out of Phoenix, where you can separate yourself a little bit more on a half-mile track like Bristol, where everything's so tight. The lap variation is very, very small. So like you can see a guy put down the 12th best lap in qualifying, but really just had the best car potentially. But Ryan Blaney put the best lap down in practice and qualifying. He best average times, he just looks better than everyone. And the huge advantage that race leaders have here, especially on race restarts or the start of this race in particular, where we really care about it, plus the fact that he appears to have the best car, just screams the fact that he's going to be able to jump out to the lead and potentially lead the whole first stage. I did the premium podcast last night with Brian, and I believe he said the average first caution is around lap 81. So even if Blaney just leads the first 81 laps, he's got a good built-in dominator base just there, even if he doesn't lead at all the rest of the race. He's going to score fast laps because he has a really fast car, and he has that number 1 pit stall, which is going to help him regain that lead if he were to lose it at times and things of that nature. It's really hard for me to imagine him not dominating at some point and to not dominate a lot of this race, not to lead a lot of laps. The fear would be that he crashes out because Bristol can be a bit wild at times, right? We've seen high carnage races here. I think 2020 had like 17 cautions or something wild. That's always a possibility. But for me, this feels like a top 5 guy all race long, a guy that's going to lead a ton of laps and has a really easy path to being optimal because the way this track is, the way that resin's going to impact the first half of this race, where I think the bottom lane is going to be the place to be early in the race. I just think Blaney's going to be set up to dominate a lot early, and that's such an obvious great play for this race.
Yeah, I do think I agree with everything you say there. The slight other concern I'll add to the Blaney thing here is he hasn't been great here in the next gen car, right? And I mean, Penske has not been great here in the next gen car. I know they both bar cars look to have showed up with speed today, so I mean, they definitely could have got that switch, turned around, but that is a slight concern there, right? But yeah, I agree. Got it, Jim. So just from an ownership standpoint, right? Let's say Blaney comes in at 40% owned. 1, do you think that's accurate? And 2, if he's 40% owned, let's play a game here, okay? Or are you going to pump the brakes on that ownership? Or are you going to you're going to come a little under? You're going to set the cruise control, probably come in around the field at 40%? Or are you going to wall ride that bitch and you're going to be way over the field on Ryan Blaney today?
I personally am way over the field on Ryan Blaney. I don't feel
good
about
riding
it, but I'm all about it. It's just such an easy path to leading the first 100 laps. And we've seen this here, except for Eric Almirola. Basically, the pole setter is at a huge advantage. Not only that, guys are going to lead 100 plus laps. We typically see like 3 drivers lead 100 plus laps. Maybe that third guy's leading 70 or 80 laps, but we see so many dominators put up 100, 150, 175 lap dominator performances here, and Blaney set up the best to do that. So I want to lean into that. I don't want to get away from it. If it was a Vegas race where I can see him losing the lead after 40, 50 laps and his dominator potential is a lot less, his impact on the slate as the dominator, the first 20% of the race is less. Yeah, I might be more apt to pay 2 other drivers who I think would lead or potentially win. But on this track where it's going to be tough to pass, he's got the fastest car, all the things line up for him to just lead the first whole stage or the first whole half of the race. I can't avoid that. And so I'm going to be at least be on the field or over. And I don't care if it's 40%. That's a low number, in my opinion, based off the upside that this play has. And if he was mediocre in practice and like Josh Berry, and we kind of talked about this too, like Josh Berry was like 33rd in practice overall speeds, but qualified second. Justin Haley was 5th in overall speeds and qualified 33rd, right? Practice speeds aren't always a great correlation to what we see speed-wise in qualifying and in the race. Sometimes they lie. And that's why in a 15-lap session or 15-minute session where practice times can really get skewed, especially with one guy spinning out or whatever, it's hard to lean into those. But Blaney was the best car in practice. He just was. And then he put down the best lap in qualifying. And Logano looks good as well and put down good times. And it's just hard for me to get that out of my head that just like last week when all the Toyotas were good, it just feels like all the Penske guys are going to be good. Like even Harrison Burton qualified 13th.
Yeah.
It just feels like they have speed. And I don't care that he's going to be heavily owned. I want to be overweight on that because if he does dominate, then I'm beating 60% of the field. Right. And that's why if he's 40% owned, I'm fine with that. I'm fine being overweight because I want to beat 60% of the field and be happy with it. And the upside is so huge. And the same thing goes for like a Larson and a Bell too, which we'll get to in a second. But anyone that can put up in Hamlin, anyone that can put up 200 plus laps led has the ability to destroy the slate for anyone that doesn't have one. And versus in other slates where I worry about guys crashing out and hurting lineups, now I worry about not having the right dominators and hurting lineups.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, like with some of the upside we see, like take last year's race, for example, we saw 3 guys score over 100 points, right? So even if you're playing, if you build your lineup to have like 3 guys with that potential, right? And even if one of those guys even if they're all 30% owned, right? But you hit on one of those guys that carries your lineup to 130 points, right? Like you have to have that guy to even make the cash lineup. Like you're not going to cash without that guy in your lineup because 30% of the guys have him, right? So yeah, maximizing getting as many of those guys in your lineup is definitely going to be key today. And also, like just to underpoint your point about track position and Blaney starting track position, we saw both guys starting in the front row optimal last year, first and second place starter. So yeah, let's talk about more of those dominator guys. There's a lot of potential here, right? It's not just gonna be one guy leading these laps. Like I said, last year we saw 3 guys score 100 points. And one guy scored 40 plus dominator points and wasn't even optimal, right? So who are these guys that you're going to focus on for dominator points today? Who are some of your favorites?
So the big 4 in this race are Blaney, Bell, Larson, and Hamlin. Hamlin dominated won the last race here. Bell was a massive dominator, but from the pole, so he had that early path to early domination like Blaney does this time around. He led 187 laps last year. But I think Blaney is an obvious one. Bell and Larson are really good options coming from a little bit deeper. And then Denny Hamlin starting 3rd. I mean, all the Toyotas, again, the JGR guys look strong. They look to have really comparable speed to run towards the front. Not that race breaking speed, like just clear the field like they were last week, but they seem in the conversation with the Penske's, with the Larsons, with everyone else at the top. So that's going to give them a lot of viability. Those 4 are all going to carry a lot of ownership. They're all going to have huge upsides, just like I've mentioned probably 10 times already. But that dead horse feels like when I have to beat on a slate like this, it feels like you have to make sure you reiterate, dude, if one of these guys gets out there for 150 laps, they're scoring 100 plus points and crushing the field. So those are the big 4. Now, there are some contrarian plays that I do like that I'm heavier on.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go into your contrarian guys, can you rank those your top 4 for me? How would you rank them? it will help you.
Blaney, Larson, Hamlin, Bell, but Hamlin and Bell are interchangeable. Like they're all interchangeable. I'm lighter on Hamlin in my builds, but I still see him as one of the top 3 threats. So it's tough, and that's where I took the stand on going a little bit lighter on Hamlin, a little heavier on Bell. But that can easily hurt me, right? But those 4, like they're all interchangeable. Blaney's the easiest in terms of what his potential is right there in front of him, and then Larson feels like the most likely to do it just based off of his skill and ability at this track. But those 4 just like it's a blanket. So, and I do like building with 3 of them in your lineups. You talked about 100 points for 3 guys last year. Now, Ty Gibbs was one of those, and he was really cheap. But if these 3 guys or 3 of these 4 guys score over 100 points, just punt with Justin Haley. It doesn't matter if he scores 20 points. You're getting 100 points from Denny Hamlin, right? So, like, consider a super punt. It doesn't matter. You care more about the Dominator points than having to play a cheap punt that only gets 25 points.
Yeah, that exact scenario, that exact lineup you mentioned was actually the optimal last year, right? You had 3 guys all starting, all priced at 10,800 and above, so averaging over 11,000 for 3 guys, right? And that was your optimal lineup, and then 3 punts. So,
yep,
yeah, it's definitely valuable.
All right, so can I get to my contrarian plays that I love so much?
Yes, go to your contrarian plays.
Yes. So there's 2 guys that I really like on the slate, and I don't think they're necessarily huge surprises, but I think they're going to come in underweight. So much tension is going to be on those 4 drivers I just mentioned. Joey Logano and Chase Elliott. They start 4th and 5th. They are pure dominators, right? Like they start too far ahead. They don't have any place differential potential, but they have fast cars. Like Blaney and Logano, I think there's a lot of correlation there between their speed. I think if Blaney has race winning speed, I think Logano is going to be close behind. I think Logano is a guy that can lead laps here. He's won here. He's led laps in the past, not with the next gen, but in the past with Penske. If they just have the best setup, if Penske have it dialed in this week, then there's no reason to think that Logano can't contend for the lead at some point. And he's only 9,500, so I can get 2 top tier guys, and Logano be my 3rd guy to save some salary, and then do some other things. Maybe I can squeeze in a Ross Chastain and a Ty Gibbs instead of having to pay down to the Haleys or the host of ours and Priest and that level. So I like Logano, and then I really like Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott has a fantastic track record here as well. Top 5 guy almost regularly here, unless Kevin Harvick causes him to blow a tire and they get into a pissing match or things like that. I mean, Chase Elliott's ability here is well known. He starts 5th. He's only 8,300. Everyone's going to be on Ross Chastain at 8,500. Starting 36, huge place differential play. But what if Chase Elliott has one of the best 4 cars, has 40 or 50 fast laps, leads for 30 laps, scores 70 points, and is a better value than Ross Chastain? I think that's totally plausible. You don't need him to lead 100 laps, but he can. Chase Elliott definitely has that ability, and he has the track position in his favor. He's going to have a good pit stall. He's going to have everything set up well for him. 8,300 is a fantastic price tag for that, and I think he's just going to be up front the entire race. So Elliott, Logano feel like guys that you can pivot to off of the top tier guys instead of forcing in a 3rd expensive driver. You can pivot down to them and get a really good driver, good track history here, guys with wins at this track and with fast cars. And so I think they're really good options, and I think the ownership is going to be relatively low on both of them. So I like that aspect as well.
Yeah, I'm going to push on the ownership a little bit. Like I have seen a lot of Elliott love. I feel like, just me not even like barely like looking this week. I've seen some Elliott love, and obviously he's got the name. He's cheap 8,300. We know he's good on concrete. He's good at this track. Like, what do you think his ownership is going to come in at?
So I projected it at, let's see here, so I don't misquote my own self. I underprojected him at 14%, probably. It may come in at like 18%. My thing is that I think Ross Chastain just eats up the ownership in that range. Mm-hmm. He's starting 36 and was like 1st in overall average lap time. Ross Chastain is going to look really good to people. He's going to look very enticing. Chris Buescher also starts 34th, and he's going to look really enticing to people, and he's just above Logano. So I think Buescher and Chastain just rob ownership off of Logano and Elliott, is my opinion. And then I think you're going to see even Tyler Reddick and Brad Keselowski take some ownership in that range, and then Ty Gibbs take some ownership in the range. So while I could see Chase Elliott clear 20%, I do think that's possible, and it all depends on what other sites say, right? Like if we have two big sites that are both on Chase Elliott, then yeah, that's going to pump up his ownership a little bit. But I think it's more around the 15%. I'm probably a little high on Chastain and a little bit low on Elliott. I can probably adjust that if I wanted to. I think it's kind of irrelevant. If he's 18% versus 14%, I'm not really that worried. Anything under 20% with Chase Elliott's a good number for me, and I'm excited about that. So
you're going to guess, right?
Yeah. Now, if he were to come in at like 25%, I'd be pretty disappointed because then I'm like, yeah, okay, he ended up a lot higher than I expected, but it's still hard to figure out what people will do when you have these sites that will say and do things. Like there was a race, it was Vegas, where Hamlin was projected for less than his floor by a big site, and it made no sense. But then his ownership was 23% instead of 35%, and he started in the 30s. So literally, if these sites miscalculate or misproject or say someone's a great play, it can skew things a little bit. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Elliott at that price to be over 20%, but I think he'll be under it. And that's my hope. And I hope he is, because I am well over that number. I have a few bullets with him that I think line up well.
I will say I do think he projects well today for his price, and I think if you're looking at, like, I don't know, I obviously haven't looked at any optimals or anything like that, but I would think like Blaney probably projects really well as well. You could start your build Blaney, Elliott, both the PD guys, Bush or Chastain, right, and you still got.
I want 3 DOMs. I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I want 3 winners.
You don't want that. I'm saying but I'm saying that'll be I feel like that's a very popular way to start, right, for the casual. I feel like starting with Blaney,
I do, yeah.
I think Chastain, then you can go right to Elliott there for another potential PD Dominator. I just think that might be.
I think there's a lot of casual players that will not push in that third Dominator. I do believe that will be the case, and so that's why I think Chastain and Chastain more so, we'll see so much ownership, because I think people are like, okay, I got my Blaney, I got my Larson, now I want Chastain for the place differential. And well, I think that can cash, and I think that's a good option for cash tournaments or things of that nature. I know the upside of Dominators at this track, and I know the fact that I can get 3 guys scoring over 100 points if they lead, and that happens so frequently here. I mean, almost yearly, almost every race here has that. So for me, I do want to play Elliott, and maybe the field will know that. Maybe I'm underestimating the smartness of people, but it's just that's the way I think, and I might be completely wrong, but no. I think he's lower on.
I'm asking the tough questions today, Larkin. Let's anybody else that we're missing that has Dominator upside? Some guys that I highlighted that could get some steam based on their odds. Like, do you have any interest in you guys? Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, because I feel like for his price starting 17th, he can't just bring us home with PD. It's gonna have to get us some Dominator points. Would you agree there? And then Ty Gibbs, maybe he had a good performance last year. And what about Bubba, who had some speed in practice? Any of those guys?
Yeah, so I think there's a few guys. So, like, to start off with, guys like William Byron and Martin Truex have to dominate the factor, and you're kind of touching on that with starting position with Keselowski and them. Even more so with Byron. William Byron's never led a lap here in a Cup, points paying race. So it's hard for me to say he's a good play, but he always runs top 10 too. So maybe he gets out front at some point. Truex, again, not great at this track, similar to Byron. He has top 10 finish, but not a lot of domination or anything there. But those are type of like extreme pivots. The guys you mentioned are people that I feel more comfortable with speed wise, that I think can factor in a bit. But last year our Dominators pretty much all started up front. Even Corey LaJoie was a 10th place starter, and his was strategy based, but he even was a 10th place starter that had more speed in this car. Our top 3 biggest Dom started top 8, first and second for Hamlin and Bell. That's pretty much what I would expect. In 2022, we had that weird Ford Enigma where they were all really fast, but they all blew tires. So they all qualified all over the place, and the leaders were from all over the place. I don't really know how to read anything away from that race. Like, it just felt like such an anomaly. But yeah, I don't know if Keselowski has that race dominating speed. I don't know if Bubba Wallace has the talent to outdrive the Larsons, the Bells, the Hamlins, and those guys straight up. Like, he just doesn't do that frequently enough, especially on short tracks. He does on intermediates occasionally, and that's why we like him there often. But I'm not sure if any of those guys are great options. Ty Gibbs is cheap enough at $8K that I almost don't need the Dominator points. And so I'm more comfortable with that play as a just kind of a stud mid-tier play that I'm hoping finishes like 6 with some fast laps, like a guy that can score 60, 65 points and be the last guy in my lineup salary-wise, right? Like I can't pay up the Chastain. I can't even get Elliott. I can't get, maybe I already have 3 Dominators. Maybe I have Blaney, Bell, and Logano or some nature like that, and then I can still get Gibbs. Maybe that's how I would build that. But I feel like I have tunnel vision to an extent here with about 6 guys, and maybe that's wrong. All these guys have the ability to do it. Gibbs obviously did it last year. Brad Keselowski's fantastic at this track. I think those guys are all plausible. Kyle Busch, I'm not high on as much, but he's also really, really good here at Bristol. So it's hard. Like if you told me right now, will any of them lead? I'll say no. And I don't think it'll work out as Dominator plays. But would I be shocked if the strategy went their way, or if they found their way up front, or if the top lane came in and Kyle Busch just started ripping off laps? No, I wouldn't be shocked either. I think Keselowski and Gibbs can be played in that pseudo place differential / stud role more so than a Dominator, where I think they're the type of guys that can finish top 5. They can get 30 or 40 fast laps, and maybe that can boost their score a lot more than you would project out. But definitely Contrarian for sure. And I don't know. I'm not going to go there very often personally, but maybe the field won't either. Like I was looking at head-to-head numbers, and Kyle Busch is an underdog against like everyone decent. Like surprisingly an underdog versus people. And people were on him a lot.
He's like surprising considering he's the fifth as far as odds to win. So
yeah, I was looking at it, and I don't want to delay us too much here. But I can probably pull it up real quick if I'm competent enough to find it. So Tyler Reddick's -110 versus him. Tyler Reddick's not a good play. Tyler Reddick's not a good driver at this track, and he's -110 versus Kyle Busch. That doesn't make sense to me. So play Kyle Busch. That has flipped. Tyler Reddick, I think, was the favorite earlier. Chris Buescher is -125 versus Busch. So he's the favorite over Busch right now, and he's starting 34th. And Kyle Busch has a much better track history here. So that's weird to me. And then Ty Gibbs is -145 versus Kyle Busch. Again, starting 19th, not the track record. So Ross Chastain's also a favorite over Kyle Busch. So Kyle Busch is the underdog versus all those guys. So
wow, that's wild.
Yeah, for him to be that big of a favorite in terms of being the potential race winner, but not a favorite to beat any of those guys head to head is weird.
Seems like a mistake.
Because that's not what's reflecting. Yeah, none of those guys are priced above him as a potential race winner, but they all have better odds to beat him, except for that one guy who's like -110 versus -120. So, I find Kyle Busch to be an enigma in the slate. I've seen a lot of love for him. I'm doing that giveaway. If you haven't entered, I'm giving away a Chase Elliott diecast. It's on my Twitter. It's pinned up there, or X or whatever it's called. A lot of people pick Kyle Busch in that contest. And I'm just sitting there like, why? What's your reasoning? I don't think he should be a top 5 pick for the win. I think he's probably like the 10th most likely driver to win, but it's still Kyle Busch and it's still Bristol. So definitely plausible.
Yeah, he's a guy who I think will be close to that 10% probably on range. So definitely leverage there. All right. Anything else to add on the Dominators before we roll into the position differential plays?
Let me answer this question real quick. So FanDuel question here, how many Dominators? So I have this nifty chart that kind of shows how FanDuel scoring goes. And for the extremely high lap races, the Dominator points factor in so much more on FanDuel in this style of race than it does like in standard races or low lap count races. Instead of having like a pretty even separation for all track types like DraftKings has, FanDuel is it's such a huge difference between here and other tracks. You want 2 Dominators in your lineups. We talk about guys leading 150 laps. You want those guys because most likely they're also finishing at the front. If you can afford 3, that's great. Like if Logano or Elliott can lead some and you get 3 guys, great. But Chastain is also a really good option on FanDuel because of the price. Like I'm also more into a guy scoring 20 place differential points on FanDuel than I am a guy leading 100 laps and getting 10 points for leading 100 laps, if that makes sense. So you kind of weigh that balance. You want the 2 most two best dominators there, I believe, and they're most likely going to finish at the front. And then I think you're going to want probably one of the big place differential guys or two of them, a couple guys that add place differential points and finish top 10. That's probably how I would build. So it's going to be more of a balance, like two dominators, two top 10 finishers, and then salary-wise, you may have to punt to someone who's a little riskier, but there are some cheap options. There are some guys like Priest that finish top 17 here like every time, or top 15 here every time, that we can kind of bank on if you want to punt with some salary on FanDuel. But yeah, definitely two dominators on there. I know we covered it's all the same people on that slate. I'm not going for three on FanDuel. Most likely I'm going for two and then a place differential guy.
Man, look at you go, hosting the show and answering the questions. Man, just doing it all over there. Pulling the questions out. Yeah, slacking.
Let's get this moving along. We gotta keep the total time down to get the viewers up. Remember. So,
all right, let's get to the PD plays. I know it's not going to be a huge focus for you. It sounds like today. So let's. You've kind of already touched on, a little bit of how you're approaching the top guys. So let's see, what are you doing with those higher priced, chalkier PD options on the slate, Busher and Chastain?
So I have zero Chris Busher, zero. I feel pretty confident in that. Now, he can hurt me, but I'm chasing dominators. I'm chasing the upside, the 100-point upside. And unless Chris Busher leads at some point in this race and wins, he's not reaching that. I don't care if he scores 65 points. Like, that's just irrelevant to me. And I don't want to pay 9,800 for a guy that scores 65 points when I know there's going to be guys scoring 80, 90, and 100 points. So the salary is too high for me to want to be on him. Now, if you play him in cash, that's fine. If you want to lock in 65 points and maybe min cash, that's fine. But if you're chasing the optimal, if you're chasing the winning lineup, I don't think he's on it. So I'm getting away from it. Now, if he goes out there and has 50 fast laps and finishes third, I'm going to look like a jackass because he's probably going to score really damn well. But I'm willing to take that risk that he's just going to be.
Fords are fast, right?
Fords are fast, but so are Toyotas, so is Larson. So he has to outrun a lot of guys. And so I think he has top 10 potential. I think he'll score well. I don't think he's optimal. And so I'm going underweight on him. Ross Chastain is cheaper by a lot. I think he's $1,300 less in terms of salary. That's more easy for me to stomach. I can find three dominator combinations and get Chase Elliott. Or get Ross Chastain. Chase Elliott's right there. I told you I loved them so much. But I can get Ross Chastain with three dominators. I can build for three potential dominators and still get him. So I don't mind him as much as salary works out. But again, if I'm choosing between Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain, I'm probably going to hunt that dominator in my lineups a lot more often. So the prices there with them are pretty high. And then I guess Bowman and Gibbs kind of fit into that. Gibbs is $8K. Definitely a place differential play, but I think he has potential to add fast laps and finish up towards the front. So I do like him. And then the lower we get here in salary, the more I start to like these guys. Bowman has a really good track history, but still 7,500. And when I was building lineups, it was a struggle to get there. And then once I was able to get there, I was like, but can I just pay for Gibbs, who I like more? Or can I get to Ross Chastain, who obviously has a better potential? And so even with Bowman, I wasn't super emphatic with my love for that play. It kept seeming like I wanted to get off of him. But he has 4 top 10s and 7 finishes of 16th or better in 10 starts here with Hendrick. So 70% of the time he's finishing 16th or better, and he starts 29th. So you kind of need to factor in that he's going to finish 15th with 14 place differential points, and he's going to score 40. Now, 40, don't care about. But if it becomes a 10th or a 9th place finish and he's scoring over 50 points, Bowman could be a great play at 7,500 in that nice final, or the most expensive of your place differential guys or your salary saver. So Bowman works out really well, but I kept going down. I kept paying down in this range. So literally all these guys I didn't end up on enough probably, but they are good options. They make sense. I want to spend my salary on dominators more though.
Yeah, it makes sense if that's where you're putting your dollars at, is on those dominator points, then you're going to be more attracted to those lower price PD options, right? And really, paying down and getting the value there. I know you said you are going to be playing some Ross Chastain, right? But you would, if he comes in at 40% owned, I'm guessing you're probably going to be under the field on him though. Still.
Oh yeah, I'll be way under on that. I think I'm at 20%, maybe even less. I might be at 16%. Yeah, I just I like being able to leverage that. I like being able to be underweight on him. But then two, I like the aspect that I don't think his ups I don't think he leads. I don't think he gets a lot of fast laps. I don't think this is a track where he goes out there and dominates. I think he has a good run. But man, if he comes in at and scores 55 points, I'm gonna be jumping for joy. And 55 sounds good. And if I was getting 55 points at Vegas, I'd be thrilled. I don't give a crap about 55 points here from Ross Chastain. To me, that's not optimal. So I'm excited if that happens.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of perspective to that, I know I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I mean, Ty Gibbs, right, last year scored 85.5 points, and he was not optimal, right? Because he was in that price range of like 7K or 8K, right? And the guys above him scored over 100. You know, like those higher price scores all scored over 100, right? So, and plus he had some value come through. So yeah, just they can have a massive day like what you said, and still just not the right play, right? So, let's see here. So yeah, as you go down, right, you're gonna start to like those value plays a little bit. I mean, the PD plays a little bit more. I mean, so what do you think about Daniel Suarez? He's $500 cheaper than Bowman. Seems like a decent position if you'll play today.
Yeah, it seems good. And there's going to be times where he can be you can have 3 Dominators and he's like the most expensive place to play you can get. The issue for me here is that he's finished 21st, 19th, and 22nd with Trackhouse in his 3 starts here. Not very good. I mean, that's pretty bang average. And I don't trust him as a driver. And then I look at guys like Ricky Stenhouse, who has huge upside, or Gregson, who started off the year fantastic, or being able to pay down for guys like Ryan Preece and other guys. And it was still hard for me to land on Suarez. Mathematically, It lines up great. Mathematically, he looks really good. Because if he finishes 15th, it's a good play. If he gets to 12th, it's a great play. We could see 10 guys crash out of this race, and that easily make Daniel Suarez end up, like 10th or 12th. So you just never know how this race goes. But based off of his recent results at this track, based off of his skill level, my perceived skill level that he has, I just don't I just don't see it working out for him. But on the flip side, everything lines up. Everything lines up for him. If he has a good race, he stays on the lead lap, he finishes top 15, it's going to score really well. So I don't hate the play. I'm just not as high on him as I will be on some of these other guys we talked about.
Yeah, I do agree that I like those guys immediately priced below him. Gregson, Stenhouse definitely seem like more attractive options when you're looking at their speed and what they've done.
I want to answer one more question real quick.
Yeah, answer it.
It just popped up. Why is Byron projected to be low owned? Is he not a good play at 10,700? So we touched on this. He's never led a lap here, right? He's never led a lap, and he typically just runs 8. In a race where we need 2 or 3 dominators are going to lead a ton, and he's never done it, it's really hard to get to him, especially when he's got such extreme competition to deal with Blaney, with Hamlin, with Logano, with Elliott, with Larson, with Bell. Like, those are elite guys who live here all the time. So it's hard to get to Byron. So Byron's going to see really low ownership, maybe 10% type ownership. If that's the case, and he does lead, though, and you play him, you could steal the slate. So I just want to reiterate Dominators one more time.
I'm going to add like one more final thought about some of these mid-range PD guys we were talking about, right? Like, I also think just from an upside standpoint, like you might want to constrict some of your upside expectation from some of these PD plays, because they are reapplying the resin this morning. Or they did reapply the resin this morning, right? It's going to make this track, at least in my opinion, this first couple hundred laps is going to be a one groove racetrack. It's probably going to be hard to move through the field. Like, there is definitely going to be plenty of opportunities for these guys to just not be able to move forward as fast as they would like to and just end up stuck a lap down, right? Like Chastain, Buescher could get stuck a lap down, and just that their upside would be hampered, from that point on moving through the race. So that's why the lower price guys you get to, targeting that PD seems a little bit more attractive, because, that ceiling may be hampered, but the price is lower. So let's go down and start talking about, those value options, like, your Noah Gragsons, your, the guys down in that range below, 7,000.
Back up. Yeah, so Noah Gregson's making me look like a jackass, because I've been negative on him. Like last year, he sucked. He was awful. And I kind of lean into that going into this year, and he has made me look stupid to start the year. Like, he's looked fantastic. I'm not
I
gonna
haven't
not
played him this year specifically because of your ass, just so you know.
great. Thank you. Yeah, no, like, and that's the frustrating thing. Like, Vegas, I have the optimal if Noah Gregson doesn't exist, but he existed. So what's it matter, right? Noah's been great, and so that changes my belief in him. He's still 6,700. Starting 22nd's a little high. Like, it is a little high for my liking, but if he finishes top 10, it doesn't matter, right? And he's done that the last 2 weeks, or I guess he was 11th last week when Hamlin passed him on the last lap. But he's run top 10 the last 2 weeks. So there's no reason to think that he can't do it again. He had a lot of success here in the Xfinity Series that can correlate maybe. So it's definitely a track where he seems fine on. But this is, again, the issue I have with him is I don't see him as an elite driver. I see him as a second-tier driver at best. And when I think of this track, I think of big boy racing. I see the best of the best teams, the best drivers deliver here, right? And you can make up for a car that's maybe mediocre and get good results. And we see that all the time with guys like Brad Keselowski or Ryan Preece, who we'll get to in a second, who just has a phenomenal track record here. I'm still leery of Gregson. I still don't love the price point, and I don't love that he doesn't give me as much place differential as other guys. But if he's the one guy that finishes top 10 out of this group, then he's the one guy you need. And so yet again, he's in play from that same situation. So I don't mind him at all. I do like Stenhouse better from a GPP perspective, like in terms of an upside, and they're right there next to each other in pricing, so that works. Listen, Ricky Stenhouse has wrecked here a lot. I mean, a lot. And I think he's crashed out 5 of the last 7 races, and that's very, very scary. But he also had a 9-race stretch here with Roush where he finished, top 10 6 times. And then he finished 14th and 16th in 2 of the other races. He finished 10th here last year. I know Ricky Stenhouse has a top 10 upside. From 27th and a top 10 finish, that is the perfect play. So he offers 5 more place average points than Gregson. I feel like he's more likely to finish top 10 than Gregson. So I like that play better. I'm just paranoid that he crashes because that's what he does. He loves crashing, right? And so I don't want to go overweight. This goes back to the ownership side of things where you need to make sure your exposure is correct, because if he does crash out, if he does do that Ricky Stenhouse thing, he screws you. But to just harp kind of back on his good races, he started 25th and finished 10th last year. That's exactly what I want this year. That is literally what it is. He started 25th and finished 2nd. He started 19th, finished 9th. He started 32nd, finished 16th. 25th, finished 4th. 21st, finished 6th. 21st, finished 2nd. I don't care that he qualified 27th. He always qualifies in the 20s here, and he delivers great performances a lot of times. So that's a tournament play I want to chase more than Gregson, just because I think the upside is greater, and I think his ability at this track's better. And so I really like Ricky Stenhouse, but I'm also very paranoid of Ricky Stenhouse.
I would argue, though, between that duo there you mentioned as well, I think Stenhouse is probably going to come in lower owned than Gregson as well, right? Gregson with like you said, back-to-back top 10s. You look at his practice speeds; he's got speed in practice. If you look at his odds to win, it's half of what Stenhouse is, right? Yeah, I definitely think that
I got him pretty equal. I got Stenhouse just above Gregson, but it's pretty equal. Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of going to be similar situation ownership wise. I think that's really just what people see. If they're jumping on the Gregson bandwagon because of the last 2 weeks, then I think he could see more than Stenhouse, but I think it'll be pretty close overall.
Did you say the Gregson bandwagon?
Bandwagon. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got something in my eye. I've had it for like 10 minutes and it's driving me crazy. So I'm thinking more about that than saying words properly.
All right, so let's get to some other guys, right? So we talked about Gregson, Stenhouse. I don't think either one of them is going to be too high owned, but who are going to be our chalk?
Do we need to talk about Josh Berry?
You tell me, man. I haven't. Should I be paying attention to Josh Berry today? I mean, I know the front row was off from last year.
So I want to touch on him because we talked about Dominators. I do not like Josh Berry. I think he drops back to like 10th or 12th or something and doesn't do well. He could finish 5th or 6th, maybe he can get some fast laps. Between Gregson, Stenhouse, Austin Dillon, Allmendinger, Priest, those guys, I feel like one or two of them are going to score 55 points, right? I feel like one or two of them going to finish top 15 and do really well. I feel like the law of averages, someone's going to hit. The odds of Barry getting like 30 fast laps and finishing fifth feels less likely to me, but it's possible if his car's quick enough. The one caveat to this is, what if Ryan Blaney drives into turn one and just kind of loses it, right? Gets loose, washed up track, whatever, and Barry takes the lead and leads the first 50 laps or 40 laps and finishes 6th or 7th. Could he be the sneaky play? I think you want to at least have a little exposure to that happening just in case, because it is hard to pass the leader. He is quick. He could just sneak into the lead here on the race start and then lead 50 laps. And so I want to cover that, at least throw that out there. I don't want to play it personally, but I can see it working. If you play 150 lineups, if you do the mini max, you do things like that, put a little Barry in just in case.
What about if you play 6?
No.
Don't play Barry. Got it.
Don't play Barry. Let him beat you. Because, I think on the flip side of that is like, okay, maybe he does that performance and scores 60 points. I still think you can get close with Stenhouse and those other guys to where he's not killing you. Now, if Josh Berry goes out there and leads 200 laps, that'd be fantastic. Like, that'd be crazy. But so what? It beat me. I accept it. I move on. I'll move on with my life. But it's just interesting. It just popped up in my head where I'm like, man, what if he leads? But yeah, the biggest driver. So I made Austin Dillon one of my tournament favorites as well. I know people are not going to want to play him, dude. He is the most unlucky human being on the planet right now. It feels like just every crash involves him, but his track record is really damn good here. In his last 5 Bristol races, he's got a 6th, a 12th, a 15th, and a 17th, and he's starting 31st. Any of those results right now, I will take a 17th place. If you give it to me, I'm taking that from Austin Dillon. The fact that he has 12th or 6th place upside feels phenomenal. Yeah, he may only run 24th. Yes, he may continue the bad streak and crash out. But dude, 6,300, an immaculate track record. Like one of the better track records for what I would call the mid-tier drivers. Like not an elite driver, not a guy that's going to lead laps, but when you're just looking at guys at 7K and below, it's a consistent finish in that range. And sure, he has the wrecks, but if you go back even before the last few races, a 14th, a 13th, a 15th, a 13th, a 4th, a 13th, 10th, 11th, like this guy loves the top 15 at Bristol. Like it obviously gets him off. So I would probably get off too if he delivered another one today because I'm very high on him. But sorry, Mom, if you're watching. But it's such a great play, and I don't think anyone's going to play him. I think people will get away from him. I do think people want to be off of him because of the way he's crashed out, because of his poor performance the last 2 years. And I know he has top 15 ability in him, and so I want to hammer that type for tournaments. And then AJ Allmendinger is kind of the same situation, but he doesn't have the same track record, right? Like they start right next to each other. The price is pretty similar. But AJ doesn't have that track record.
He won here, didn't he? In the Xfinity, right?
He won in Xfinity, but dude, like he beat Austin Cindric. Like you're not beating anyone in Xfinity. Like I just don't care. Like you beat Allgaier and Gregson, and like, woo, you won a race. Yeah, there's 4 guys that can win the race, and you're one of the 4. So Xfinity races don't really matter to me somewhat. Like it's a good sign.
Here last year or 7th year 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, and AJ's decent. Like I think AJ's decent, but like he was 30th last year. He was 39th.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
races ago. Like I think he's hit or miss. I think he has potential. Not as consistently in the top 15 like Austin Dillon is. He has 2 of those top 15s in his last 10 starts. Like, Now both of those were top 10s, so obviously the upside's there. I like AJ. I think he's a fine play. I think he looked decent in practice. I think they're all fine. Like everyone in this range is fine. If they can stay on the lead lap and stay out of trouble, they all can finish top 15. So they all work out. I just like Dillon more, but AJ is a good option as well.
Yeah, I think if you're, because I think the important thing to point out here is like if you're building lineups like how I believe you're suggesting today, like a bulk of your lineups is probably going to have 3 guys in this below 7K range, right? Like so if you're playing 3 guys in this below 7K range, like you're going to have some shares of Dinger, you're going to have shares of Dill. Like you can't get away from those guys. Like when you're ranking them out, like it's gonna be hard for them not to at least land in your top 4 or top 5, right? For those plays. So yeah, you're definitely going to have those guys. So why don't you, to help our listeners out, rank those rank those value plays. Give us like your top 5 value plays under from let's go 7K and below. Rank the top 5 for us.
Yeah, so the only two we haven't touched on Priest and Hocevar, and I think they're fantastic. Priest is another guy with great track record here. Just consistent finishes. Like, yeah, I would love for him to all be top 10s, but that's not what I need from him. 12th last year, 17th, 9th, 12th, and 18th with JTG. Like, constant guy battling for top 15s, starting 25th, 5,900. That's like the steal of the slate. And the Carson Hocevar starting 35th. Obviously, he has a lot of potential, a lot of speed in his ability. To me, he's an exceptional talent, a guy that is better than a lot of the drivers around him. And I will trust on that talent to get him good finishes, right? As long as he stays out of trouble. So starting 35th, I love that play as well. So really,
is he the chalk? We tried to talk about this earlier before the show. Is he the chalk of value? Like, is he the guy? Like,
salary's going to dictate it. Yeah, when you're paying up for Larson and Bell and Hamlin, you're going to end up down here a lot. He's starting 35th. Yeah, I think Hocevar sees a lot of ownership. I think Priest sees a decent amount. I think AJ sees a decent amount too. But they see a decent amount because they're the best plays. They're the obvious plays. You told me to rank them. I like Austin Dillon, Priest, Hocevar as my top 3. And then I go Stenhouse and Allmendinger. Now, a lot of that is salary dictated. Like, I rate potentially Priest over Stenhouse just because of salary. Like, I'm just going to end up on I'm going to be on his own. Like, I'm going to be probably 50%, if not more, on him because I'm paying up for guys. But he also has such a clean track record here where I'm like, if he finishes 15th, like he always does, I got 38 points at 5,900. Yeah. Like, I just feel super safe with that play. So I really like Priest. Now, all those guys are good. All of them are viable. All of them have the ability to finish top 15. Maybe Hocevar is more of like a top 20 guy. I only need like 20th from Hocevar for that to hit. Probably 23rd, 24th. He can still be optimal at that salary because of the Dominator situation. Todd Gilliland is incredibly sneaky here, though, as well. He's finished 16th and 18th in his 2 starts at Bristol, starting 24th, super cheap, good driver. A couple of these guys bust. Like if Priest, like let's imagine a world where Priest and Allmendinger crash out and Gilliland runs 15th. I don't think that's super rare. Like, I think that's a plausible outcome. And that dude can be sitting there on about 36, 37, 38 points at 5,700 winning a slate. So I really like Gilliland as a contrarian play in that range. I think he might see like half the ownership of Hocevar and Priest potentially. Maybe not Priest, but definitely of like Hocevar. I don't know if people will be on Gilliland the way I am. And so I think he may be pretty low owned, and that could give you good leverage over some of these higher owned drivers who may crash out and may destroy a lot of lineups. So I really like those guys. All those guys I mentioned are guys I like in this range. I'm not super high on any of the guys starting towards the front. So like McDowell, who is a little bit more expensive, Zane Smith, Harrison Burton. I don't want those guys. I don't care if they run 10th because I don't think it's super likely. And I think the place like 2 of these place differential guys are just going to outscore them, in my opinion. So I'm more into the guys with bigger place differential than trying to get Harrison Burton to somehow magically have his best run ever.
Well, I will to say to that, like, we have seen value guys like in the last 2 years, at least the last 2 years here, looking back, and wind up in the optimal who have not, came from the back. Carson Hocevar last year started 16th for 6K, finished 11th, was in the optimal. And 2 years ago, we saw Michael McDowell, right, for 6,300, start 18th and finish 11th. We had, believe it or not, we got Brad Keselowski starting 10th for 6,400.
Wait, right? What?
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
All right.
Doesn't seem right.
Wow. Things were weak at RFK. Yeah. Well, the Hocevar thing kind of goes back to my talent.
Was he with NC still then 2 years ago?
Or no, 2 years ago it was RFK. That was the race he led and then had that blown tire where he was going to win and the tire blew and then Buescher ended up winning. Back to the Hocevar point where he started 16th and finished 11th. That to me is the talent thing I was mentioning with him. Mm-hmm. And I want to chase that with him starting 35th this time around. And it's all about options on a slate, I suppose. Yeah. On that particular slate, we got Carson Hocevar last year, who was incredibly cheap, and he's incredibly good and was able to deliver that result. I don't, you know,
You don't
I
feel
don't
that
know.
way about Zane Smith today? Isn't he really good and
No,
similar
I think
equipment?
Zane's a step
No?
behind him talent-wise. I
Okay.
think Zane's a good driver. I don't think he's great, and I think Zane could run I guess he could finish 11th. Sure, I mean that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's not, and if it happens, great. But that also means somehow Hocevar is not hitting, Priest isn't hitting, those other guys aren't hitting. Maybe it's a salary thing. Maybe you're ending up on Zane for salary purposes. You can do the same thing with Justin Haley if you're doing it for salary purposes. Last time we'll reiterate this because Dominators matter so much. If we need 3 guys that all crack 90 points or whatever, we need those guys, and you just have to punt with Justin Haley. Just do it. Don't worry about it. You want this Dominator points over anything. So if that means you play Zane Smith and you hope he finishes top 15, do it. If you like Haley, do it. If you want to go with Hemrick and hope it works, do it. That's fine. I just think there's a big gap between the viability of those guys and the viability of a Priest and a Hocevar and a Gilliland. I think there's a big gap between them viability-wise. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Slates are won all the time when weird stuff happens, right? But to me, those are the far, Gilliland, Hocevar, and Priest are far better options than the guys below them.
All right. Yeah, that's I think we covered it pretty well.
Wrap this up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. We are at an hour. Thank you all for sticking with us this far into it. Don't forget that subscribe to the channel, get all that stuff going. Let's go ahead and give the people your core 4, core 4, and 4 more. Give us a core 4 drivers that we should be building around today. Not necessarily build them all in the same lineup, but we should just be building around these 4 guys.
Yeah, I like Blaney and Larson up top. Obviously Blaney we covered. I think Larson's going to be a really good second half of this race. I really like it. I know I need to pay down for salary, so I'm going to end up on Priest and Hocevar a lot. So I'm going to put those 2 in there. I typically wouldn't do this where I'm playing 2 cheap options as core plays with Priest and Hocevar, but I know the salary is going to dictate that so much, and I'm going to be so heavy on those 2 that they're just core plays for me. And then I'm going to figure out the rest of my lineup from there. Whether that's
and we know we're going to be playing around 3 guys in that range, right? You know you're going to be playing around 3 guys in that value.
Likely you're playing 3 guys, so they're core plays. Now a lot of guys like Stenhouse and Austin Dillon, those are tournament guys that I really like. There's other, and that could be we didn't touch on John Hunter Nemechek at all. He can fit into that mold, right? There's guys that can do it. So there's a lot of tournament options, but in terms of guys I want to be on a lot, definitely those 2.
All right, let's give us the core 4 guys who you're going to be underweight on or not playing today.
All right, so Chris Buescher sits at the top of my list there, and that is very risky. I'll admit it's risky. I feel confident in that risk, though. I want to take that one. William Byron, another guy at the top end, because I don't think he dominates. I don't want to be on him. I'm going to go elsewhere in that range. And then I'm going to round that off with another guy kind of upwards, and that's Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick's not very good at this track. I don't see the track history. I don't think the Toyotas are so much better than everyone else that he can make up for that lack of ability. I think people are kind of maybe be on him more than they should, and I like being underweight or off of that play. And then, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't want to just pick a cheap play for the sake of picking a cheap play. So let's stick up top. Kyle Busch. Not going to be on Kyle Busch. I don't think he leads. 10,200 is too expensive for me. I'm gonna bet against him leading in this race and hope that works out for me.
I will say I do see Reddick getting some ownership projection, so that's a guy who the field might be on a little bit. And you actually saved me some money on Tyler Reddick this week because I was considering betting him outright to win when the week started like an idiot, and you're like, no, I probably wouldn't do that. So thank you.
Yeah, I can project at 19%. I do think he can see some ownership at the 9,000 price tag, but I think it's a trap. I think people are gonna be like, "Wow, he's been the best car the last 2 weeks," and I think it's.
That's what I thought. So, all right, let's get your 4 guys who you're going to be focusing on to find that leverage this slate.
All right, so let's go with Austin Dillon. Talked about him, and let's go with. I don't know if Stenhouse really fits into this for leverage sake, but I really like Stenhouse. So I'm going to put him in there. I make the rules. It's my show. And then, a couple of guys that I've talked about a lot because I am chasing Dominator points is Logano and Elliott. Like I'm going to chase it. I'm going to chase it over the place differential plays of Reddick and Busher. Now, they may completely miss. Logano may never touch the lead. He may finish 8th, and he may only score 40 points, and it may be a miss. I want to take those risks. I want to take that chance in tournament. So I'm going to throw those two guys on there.
I like it. That seems like a good roadmap to finding our way to winning $20,000 today. So that got you down for your core 4 being Ryan Priest, Ryan Blaney, pair of Ryans there, Kyle Larson, Carson Hosefar. 4 guys, poor 4 guys you are not playing. Going to be under on Chris Busher, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Kyle Busch. And then your 4 guys you're going to find leverage: Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse, Joey Logano, and Chase Elliott. All right, Ryan, as always, we all of us appreciate you, all the work you do, breaking this down for us and putting us on what we hope to be the right path. Before we end things, please tell us who's the winner. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say, like, you are undefeated on picking winners this year, right? Because, like, Daytona, you picked Suarez, but you were close. He won the next week. I think if you get within 2 weeks of picking Daniel Suarez, that counts as a win. Then you picked Kyle Larson. He won. So let's go for 3 in a row. Who's winning?
I really liked Bell kind of heading into the week. I liked him, but I can't get Kyle Larson out of my head. I got to go Kyle Larson. Starts and ends with him this week. I feel like Blaney looks super fast. Blaney would be my other pick, but I do like Larson again. I think the reason for it for me is that I think the resin starts giving up around lap 200. I think the top comes into play. And by the 400 lap mark, that top's where you need to be. And no one rips the top like Kyle Larson here. So I just think Kyle Larson shows up at the end.
All right. I like it. Let's tell everybody where to find your stuff at, man, where they can find your content. We're not going to have a show, it looks like, until Martinsville. So we're about 3 weeks away from having our next show. Yeah. So the next slice of free won't be till Martinsville. So tell the people where they can go find your stuff in the meantime.
Yeah, similar race there with Martinsville, a lot of Dominator points. So we'll build the same way. Everything's at dailyfanracing.com. We got full slate content over there. We got 3 races next week. We got F1 back. So lots of content will be there next week. I know, obviously, we're just a couple hours from this slate, so I don't necessarily expect anyone to join us. But, we had a fantastic race last night. Our top 2 plays were Eckes and Crafton, so we obviously had a great night. And I love when my core plays hit like that. I think I do a great job. Please check us out if you can. If not, you want to hang around here, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter. All those little things help, gets us out into the open more and more. Well, me, free guys that are retired don't really care as much about that. But for me, it helps a ton. And like we've mentioned, we're trying to grow the show, grow the subscribers. So at the very least, if you'll subscribe for us and tell someone about the show, that'd be fantastic.
All right, guys. Thanks again for joining. You guys know where to follow me at DFS NASCAR if you just want to see how my plants are doing or how my latest disc golf round went. Probably not much NASCAR stuff there. But as always, thanks for tuning in. I can't wait to chat with you next week. And I hope you all wind up some into the green. And don't forget to, tag us on Twitter and show us all the success you had from listening to the show today. All right, guys. Take care, and we'll see you at Martinsville.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you.